12 weeks ago, I came into this lab and had my fitness tested. Full physiological workup, VO2 max, lactate thresholds, sweat analysis, the lot. And at the end of the day, they handed me a marathon predicted time. It wasn't 2:29. So I had a decision to make. Do I change the goal or do I go away, do the work and come back 12 weeks later and see if the numbers have moved? I think you can guess what I chose. And that is exactly what we're going to go through in this video. So this whole thing started because I actually wanted to know where I was, not what my Garmin was telling me or my Strava predicted time, where I was physiologically. I booked in with The Edge. They do advanced physiological testing, proper sports science setup. I went in with basically no idea what to expect from the numbers, which in hindsight did make it a lot more interesting. And there were two main tests, the VO2 max test and the lactate threshold test, as well as doing a sweat test to figure out how much sodium I lose in an hour. Let me walk you through both of them. The sweat test came first, and honestly, I didn't think too much of it. It felt like a box ticking exercise, but what it actually does tell you is precisely how much sodium you're losing per litre of sweat, which directly determines your hydration strategy. Mine came back at 921 milligrams per litre, which puts me in the moderately salty sweater, right in the middle of the range. What that means practically is that for anything over 60 to 90 minutes, I need electrolytes in my bottles, not just water. And before long efforts, I should be preloading with higher sodium drinks to top up my plasma volume before I even start sweating. For a marathon, that information really matters, and that's why I use Cadence, but more on them a little bit later on. Then came the bit that I was actually genuinely nervous about. It was the treadmill test. The way it works is that you start off easy, like super easy, jogging pace, and then every 3 minutes they slowly increase the pace. Between each stage, they take a small blood sample from the tips of your fingers, and as you can see, they took quite a lot of samples. I just don't have much circulation going to my fingers, so they pricked me quite a few times. And in that sample, that measures your lactate. The whole thing takes about 35 to 40 minutes and ends when you can't run any longer. What they're looking for are two specific points on your lactate curve, your LT1 and your LT2. Your LT1 is where your lactate first starts to rise above resting. That's your aerobic threshold, the top of your easy zone. Your LT2, on the other hand, is the speed at which lactate starts accumulating rapidly. That's your anaerobic threshold, your red line. So basically the highest intensity you should be able to sustain for a prolonged period. And it's these two numbers that tell you more, in my opinion, about your fitness than pretty much any other indicator we can test for. I have the results in front of me here, so let's go through them on the first test. My LT1 came in at 15 kilometers per hour and my LT2 at 18, and my VO2 max came in at around 71.3. That was classified as excellent for my age, so I'll take it. My LT2 at 18 kilometers per hour is solid, and the issue wasn't my engine size, the issue was its efficiency. How much of that energy could I actually access, and would I be able to sustain it over 42 kilometers? And for me, that was a trainable thing. That was a target that I had, and that was something that I can work towards. And that's exactly what the 12 weeks were about for me. But then they gave me my marathon prediction, and based on those numbers, they said I can sustain somewhere between 85 to 90% of my LT2 for a whole marathon. That's not bad, but what that number converted to at the time was 245 at 85%, and 90% gave me a 236. My goal is 229. So there was a gap, a meaningful one, and that needed to change in these 12 weeks. I want to be clear about something here. The tests weren't bad news. A VO2 max of 71 is genuinely decent, and the timing of the test meant that I'd gained a little bit of weight post-Chicago. I hadn't really done much tempo or speed work, and I'd done a leg day the day before the workout because I hadn't seen the email that said don't do any intense exercise before this. So I wouldn't say it was the most accurate, but it still served as a good starting base as to where I was at the beginning of this block. And if you've been following my channel, then you'd understand what the last 12 weeks have looked like. It hasn't been easy coasting. There's been days where I couldn't be bothered to train, but I still did it anyways. There's been days where I ran through a storm. There's been days where I've had to readjust my plan because something work related has popped up and I had to run a marathon or pace one of my friends, etc. So I wouldn't say it has been the perfect training block, but it's definitely been a training block where I've learned so many lessons, and the training block itself has supported me in really nailing in my psychology ahead of it. I was still speaking with my sports psychologist. I was still going out and doing every single session. And even though not every single session was executed to the way that I would have loved it to be executed, you just have to roll with what your body gives you on the day. And I say it time and time again, on the days you only have like 40% and you give 40%, you've given your 100%. And that's what this training block was about. I really wanted to give the training block 100%. Did I execute the sessions at 100% capacity? That's kind of irrelevant, although the answer was no, I didn't. There were some sessions I had to readjust or change, but I gave my 100% effort into each one of those sessions. And that to me is what matters more. The thing about the training block is throughout the whole block, I was in my head thinking, am I doing enough to make enough progress to see a tangible change on that lab test? When I go back and test in 12 weeks, is it going to tell me the time that I wanted to tell me? And that was kind of looming on me the whole time I was training. Is like, yes, I really want to feel good and I want to feel strong and I'm getting the training done, but is the training enough to get me the time that I want? And more so, will the next test reflect that I'm able to get that time? And that's what we were going to find out when I was going to head back into the lab at the end of the block. I kept thinking specifically about the LT1 number, because 15 kilometers per hour, that number represents the top of my purely aerobic zone. And if I could push that upwards, if I could run faster while staying aerobic, that's directly translating into a more efficient engine. The way I was always taught it is that you can't pull your lactate 1 up by just doing top end speed stuff. You actually have to bump it up from the bottom. You push it up by doing a lot of zone 2 work, and that's what the majority of my block consisted of, is a lot of zone 2 work to try and increase my aerobic base. The other thing I kept coming back to in this phase was my lactate number at LT2. In January, it was 5.2 millimoles per liter, which basically means that at 18 kilometers per hour, which was my threshold pace, my body was producing a relatively high amount of metabolic waste. It was working really, really hard to sustain that pace. If the training was working, that number should, in theory, come down. Not because I'm running slower, but because my body is getting more efficient at processing through the lactate at those higher speeds. The thing is though, I had no way of knowing in the moment whether or not that was actually working and whether my legs were flushing that lactate at the speed at which they were accumulating them. So you kind of just have to trust the process and wait for the retest. And that kind of took me into the last 4 weeks of the training block. I started obsessing over the retest. What would the numbers show? Had any of this actually moved? I knew I was fitter, but I didn't know if I was fit enough to pass this test. Feeling fitter and having the data to back it up are two very, very different things. And I'm a data guy. The training block was done, the test was booked, same lab, same conditions, and I was about to head in to find out whether or not the training that I actually did reflected the progress I think I made. And I'll be honest with you, I was nervous. Not because I don't think I did enough, but like I said, 229 is a massive, massive goal. And I knew I was getting fitter, I just didn't know if I got fit enough. And that's what this test going in was about to prove. I had done the taper, I felt good physically, but there's something slightly uncomfortable about walking back into a place where you're about to be measured again. Because at the end of the day, the number is just going to be the number. The test itself was the same structure. Start easy, ramp up every 3 minutes, blood draw at each stage, push as hard as you can until the very end. The difference this time was that I knew what to expect and I wasn't doing a VO2 max test again, which meant that the mask was off my face. The reason I wasn't doing a VO2 max, as they explained.
Yeah, so what we're trying to find is marathon pace, if that's going to improve, and from the lactate thresholds we'll be able to see positive shifts, hopefully from your training, that they've gone up. VO2 max, once you reach your ceiling, it's not going to fluctuate too much. So seeing them lactate thresholds improve at each intensity, lower physiological stress at each speed, that's what we want to see improve.
So when my watch is saying my VO2 max is going up and down day to day, that's kind of not really accurate.
Not the most accurate way of doing it, and that's measuring it off of heart rate, but VO2 max is actually the volume of oxygen going in, so it's a rough guide, but it's not the most accurate. As you say, the lactate threshold is the best way to measure improvements in fitness. So. Yeah,
which made it a little bit easier for me, I think. Rather than just surviving this test, I was almost trying to read it in real time, thinking, how did I feel last time when I was doing this? And am I feeling fitter at this same stage of the test? And there were moments, specific stages where I thought, this feels a bit different to how it did in January. And whether the data would reflect that, I was about to find out. So again, I've just loaded up the results on my laptop of session 2, and here they are. My LT1 has actually moved. In January, it was 15 kilometers per hour. In the retest, 16. That's a full kilometer per hour shift in my aerobic threshold. What that means basically is that my aerobic threshold now is a little bit wider. It means that I can run faster before my body starts leaning on anaerobic energy. And that's exactly what 12 weeks of zone 2 work is supposed to do, and it worked. LT2, however, stayed the same at 18 kilometers per hour. So same speed, but this is where it gets a little bit interesting. The lactate reading at the intensity itself dropped from 5.2 to 4.2 millimoles per liter. So same speed, but less metabolic stress. It just means I'm producing less waste at the same speed, meaning I can pretty much hold that pace for a little bit longer, which means the engine is running cleaner. Putting all of that together, the lab has actually shifted their results a little bit and gave me a new marathon predicted time. In January, they said I can sustain about 85 to 90% of my LT2, and now they're saying I can sustain maybe 90 to 93% of my LT2. And because my LT2 hasn't shifted in terms of speed, these are the updated marathon results. My marathon ceiling before was 2:36 and now it's 2:31. 2:31 is still not my goal time. My goal time is 2:29, which to be fair, is not what I wanted to hear. I really wanted the numbers to reflect a really productive, which I mean, it was a productive training block, but I wanted it to be enough. You know, I wanted to go into this race feeling like the numbers are on my side, everything's on my side. But to be able to say that I've progressed from a 2:36 prediction to a 2:31 prediction is still incredible. And all it means is that I just need to run 400 more meters per hour speed-wise to be able to get under that 2:30 mark, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're splitting it out over 2.5 hours, that's 1.2K over 2.5 hours. That's a massive difference in a race. So it's just put me in a bit of a mental seesaw. The data does show that I am more efficient and more aerobically capable. And the data is just the data. At the end of the day, it doesn't take into account my dog score, how much I can just dog it out and sit in discomfort. It doesn't take into account my sleep, my carb loading. It's just who I was at a specific point in time, and that was last week now. So does that mean that 2:31 is my absolute limit on a marathon? No. Does that mean that that's probably a fairly good indication of where I currently was at the time of doing the test? Yes. Could those 2 minutes be made up through adrenaline, crowds, carb loading, good sleep, and just an unbelievably good race day performance? 1,000,000%. And am I going to do everything I can to make sure that I give my absolute best come race day? 100%. Ultimately, I've done the work. The data backs the work, and there's nothing that I can do between now and race day to get any fitter. All of this, the 12 weeks of training, 2 lab tests, and everything in between, it either adds up to a 2:29 or it doesn't. And if you want to know how that's going to go, then stay tuned, because my Boston video will be the next one coming out. So subscribe, wish me luck in the comments, and make sure you don't miss that one.